He fired me the same day I signed. The $1.2 billion takeover deal. The cleanest revenge is compliance. I felt the paper tremble under my hand as the ink dried on the last page of the $1.2 billion takeover. The pen clicked. The room seemed to breathe out. 3 quiet years had led to this moment. Late flights, cold coffee, and a promise I made to myself when I started here. Build something that lasts. I did not know that by evening I would be standing on the pavement with my badge dead and my name erased from the system. He fired me the same day I signed the deal. When I say fired, I mean the full performance. First came a neat email with a kind subject line that lied, then a calendar invite I ignored, because the meeting walked into my office before I could click. He arrived with too much cologne and a smile polished in elevators. He did not sit. He placed a clean envelope on my desk like a gift. He used words like restructuring, new direction, and nothing personal. It was so personal it hummed. I kept my voice steady. The chair legs scratched the floor. The envelope waited like a small white door. I opened it. The sentences were tidy, probably written by a cheerful lawyer. Notice period waived. Final payment processed. Return devices, files, keys. Even the list sounded bored, as if my years here were stationary. I wanted to laugh, not because it was funny, but because it was exact. The takeover was not a dream. It was signed. Bankers were already dialing. The board had my update. Funds were set to move. On paper, the company had just leapt forward, but he looked at me as if I were furniture he had decided to swap. He had been here 6 weeks. He loved visible change. New org chart, new slogans, a new shade of paint for the lobby. He called me kiddo once. I am a mother. I let it pass. He corrected everyone else. He brought a small circle of men who wore the same watch and laughed at the same volume. I kept quiet because the deal was fragile. If a rumor leaked, the other side would spook. If they spooked, they would walk. If they walked, 3 years would turn to smoke. So I smiled when he said I lived in the weeds. I nodded when he drew triangles on a whiteboard. I flew on weekends and told people I was just tired. Now he called me an asset the company could optimize out. He liked that phrase. I placed the envelope back on the desk and looked at the photo beside my screen. My mother holding me, my daughter gripping my finger. I remembered something my mother taught me. Real power rarely raises its voice. It waits, I said. Understood. He blinked. He had expected begging, maybe anger. He told me HR would collect my things, that security would escort me, that he needed my badge now. I handed it over. He pinched it with 2 fingers, as if it could stain him, and slid it into his pocket like a trophy. I packed 1 bag, the photo, a notebook, my grandmother's pen. He spoke about my bright future in the tone people use to end a call. My phone buzzed. I saw the banker's number. I let it ring. He was still talking. I let voicemail catch a moment that should have been a toast. Then I walked out with the bag and the pen and a calm that only arrives when the worst thing has already happened. The corridor felt longer than usual. People glanced up and then away. It is a talent to pretend you are not watching. At the elevator, the doors slid open like a stage. The security guard cleared his throat. He has known me 8 years. I'm sorry, ma'am, he said. It's okay, I said, and I meant it. Because the story was not finished. Outside, the afternoon heat pressed a hand against my back. I stood with my bag and the envelope and played the voicemail. Congratulations, the banker said. We are live. Funds land today. Call me. I saved it and called my lawyer. I did not rant. I asked him to confirm 3 lines in a document we had drafted months ago. We had prepared for storms. Storms do not RSVP. We had tucked a clause into the deal, quiet, narrow, precise, waiting for a day like this. He thought he was writing my last page. He had turned the next one. I walked to a small cafe around the corner where the tea is strong and the chairs wobble. I ordered. I listened to the spoon ring the glass. I opened the deal folder and checked the signatures one by one. Every page, every initial, steady as a heartbeat. The numbers did not blink. The terms did not flinch. The takeover was real, and it came with a lever he could not see from his glass office. The lawyer called back. He read the clause slowly, each word like a step. I closed my eyes and let it settle. When I opened them, nothing around me had changed, but the ground felt different under my feet, tilted just enough to shift the horizon. That was the moment I chose not to cry, not to rage, not to post, not to explain. I would do the one thing arrogant men never plan for. I would follow the rules completely. Procedures, notices, timings, signatures, no drama, only paper and time. I finished my tea and paid in cash. I put the envelope back in my bag. I walked toward the office again, not to argue, but to begin. Calm, deliberate, lawful, because tucked inside that quiet clause was a door only I knew how to open. And when it opened, the person who had just smiled over my badge would learn what it means when the ink dries on the right deal, and the wrong person tries to celebrate too early. I did not discover the quiet clause by luck. I wrote it with patience, in a winter week when the sun gave up early and the office floors hummed. Back then, I watched a boss burn a bridge in one meeting and pretend it was sunrise. I promised myself to respect paper more than speeches, so I sat with counsel, and we shaped a line that looked small but worked like a keel under a boat. It did not roar. It made direction. The clause said this: if I was removed without cause within a narrow window after the transaction was signed, a special board session must be called within 72 hours. In that session, voting rights aligned with execution risk, not title. People who carried the deal's risk carried the voice. It was not a trap. It was hygiene. If you want the rain, you do not break the roof while clouds gather. Most people never asked about it. They flipped pages, checked totals, smiled at headlines, and we kept moving. My lawyer smiled in the small way he does when a thing is simple and powerful. It is boring, he said. That is why it will work. Boring wins more than swagger. I kept those words like a lucky coin, so when he fired me, the timer started. Not a movie timer with a red beep, but 3 ordinary days stitched to rules. Day 1, deliver notice. Day 2, confirm funds. Day 3, convene. No speeches could stop it once the notice left my hands. And notice, in our contract, had a clean instruction. Both email and hard copy to the corporate secretary. I smiled when I read that line again in the cafe. Email can be ignored. Paper sits on a desk until it is obeyed. I walked back to the building and did everything in daylight. Security scanned me in as a guest. The lobby smelled like lemon and paint. I asked for the corporate secretary. When she arrived, I greeted her by name, because names matter when rooms are cold. I placed the notice in a simple folder. No flourish. For the board, I said. Per transaction clause 14.3. She knew the number. She is precise. She asked if I wanted a receipt stamp. I nodded. The sound was enough. Next, I went to the park across the street. I phoned the banker. Funds had landed into escrow like a plane on its runway. He confirmed wire references and value dates, the boring music that keeps deals alive. I sent a summary to the secretary for the board packet. Then I called counsel and asked him to block his calendar. He did not ask why. He said, I will bring the copy with tabs. By evening, word drifted like smoke. A friend in operations texted, Are you all right? I sent back a smile and a line about tea. I did not feed the rumor. I let the process eat it. At home, I told my daughter the story in short, careful shapes. A man thought he could push me aside, I said. But we wrote our homework well. She nodded. We cooked something simple. We watched the light slide off the wall. I checked the clock every hour and did not let the hours check me. Morning came with rain that made the streets shine like black glass. I put on a quiet dress and flat shoes. I wanted to move like a person who belongs. Outside the boardroom, the assistant offered coffee. I chose water. They arrived in waves. Some old faces I trust, some new ones still learning the map. The chair looked at me with kindness. The CEO arrived last, a minute after the minute. He nodded to the room and rested his phone on the table like a small pet. He avoided my eyes. The corporate secretary called the meeting to order and read the clause into the minutes. She did not raise her voice. A rule does not need volume. She confirmed notice, escrow funds, and the timing. Then she looked at me and said, You may speak. I started with the plainest truth. The transaction was signed, and I had delivered it. I listed the milestones we had passed and the ones ahead. I spoke of risk the way sailors talk about weather, respectfully. I told them the team across the table trusted our word. and that our word would only carry if the people who earned it were not erased for sport. I did not mention the CEO by name. I did not need to. He laughed once, softly. He did not interrupt. The chair watched him. Then counsel read the next part, the sentence most people skip. During the special session, voting rights on the deal's continuity transfer to those named as responsible executors. There were 3 names. Mine was not only present, it was first. Not because I like firsts, but because I signed the risk forms others hesitated to touch. The CEO shifted in his seat. He asked for clarification on without cause. The lawyer answered with dates, emails, and the envelope he had pressed onto my desk. He had written his own evidence and wrapped it for us. The chair thanked counsel. I kept my tone soft. I explained that I did not seek revenge, only continuity. The clause existed so storms could not steer us off the runway. If they still wanted me gone, they could do that after we landed. But if they broke the wings now, none of us would be flying. The chair nodded. The secretary marked. The rain leaned against the glass. I folded my hands. When I looked up, I saw 3 people I had mentored years ago, sitting straighter. We were ready for the vote. The CEO smiled at the window. He believed he counted noses. He believed a title could outvote a tide. He could not feel the keel under the ship, the boring line that makes direction. I learned the habit of keeping receipts from my grandmother, who folded little slips of paper into a biscuit tin and wrote dates in neat blue ink. She said money remembers when you help it remember. Deals are the same, so when people call me careful, I hear the soft clink of that tin and see her steady hands. After the clause was read and the room went quiet, I knew the air would thicken with polite doubt. Power often hides behind fog. I had planned for that. For 3 patient years, I built a clean trail anyone could follow with clear steps, timestamps, acknowledgments, signatures, confirmations. No drama, only light. First, I opened my leather notebook, worn at the edges, the ribbon resting where important things live. Inside were dates of every milestone, written by hand because ink slows you down and makes you think. Alongside sat printouts, term sheets, counterparty emails, and compliance checklists with every box neatly filled. I do not hoard paper. I keep proof. Next, I brought forward the messages that show human work behind the numbers. There was the Sunday night the other side pushed a fee change, and I held my ground with courtesy. There was the 2 a.m. winter call when our analyst found an error. We fixed it before sunrise. There was the hotel napkin where I wrote 3 suppliers we would protect because they feed families in quiet towns. The CEO had his own stack, sleek and crisp, heavy with slogans. He prefers slides without dates and words like synergy that float away when you open a window. He talked while I set my papers down. When he stopped, the room felt oddly empty, like a poster after the tape peels off. The banker joined by phone, voice steady. He confirmed escrow funding, the drawdown schedule, and covenant tests already met. He used small words. People appreciate small words when money moves. Counsel followed with a dated timeline of steps. The secretary asked for copies. I had them in triplicate, labeled, and clipped. The clips were green. Then I set down an email from his first week. He had asked me to slow the deal so he could reframe the narrative. I had replied, "We cannot play with counterparty's trust." The chair read the exchange twice, then looked at me and gave a single nod, the way he does when something sits straight. I do not enjoy fights. I enjoy order, so I kept tempo. I showed the tax opinion, the audit sign-off, the regulatory pre-clearance, and a confidential note from our largest client saying they were relieved we were buying certainty. Each item lived in a folder named the same way: date, source, subject, version. Boring beats drama every time. In my bag, I kept something less formal. A voicemail from the founder saying, "We trust you because you show up the same on Monday as you do on Friday night." I did not play it. I described it. People do not need to hear everything to understand what matters. The CEO shifted tactics. He said the numbers were fine, but optics concerned him. He wanted a louder launch, a flashy internal memo, his name at the front of the parade. I let silence answer. The chair asked for specifics. He could not find any. Optics dissolve in daylight. A new director asked about the downside. I walked her through last autumn's stress tests, the vendor map, and contingency cash we ring-fenced like a garden. I told her about the week we simulated a supply shock and how we chose to protect people, not only margins. She smiled. Numbers without people have no roots. I felt the room leaning toward the question under all the others. Who had carried the weight? I did not puff. I did not claim genius. I told them I kept showing up with work that survives the morning. Work must survive the morning. Then I opened the conflict log. In it, I recorded every time the CEO tried to insert himself into a stage he had not earned, each push to change reporting lines mid-negotiation, and his request for private updates that skipped risk. The entries were exact: dates, places, and when permitted, witnesses. I did not read the whole log. I summarized it and offered copies to counsel and the chair. I also had 10 sealed letters from team members who had worked 16-hour days. In each, they described one small decision that kept the deal clean: a missing comma noticed, a model checked, a call documented. I did not open those letters either. I said they existed. The chair thanked the team in absentia, and I saw pride move across a few faces like sunlight across water. Receipts are not only paper. They are people who will say, "She was there." The head of compliance cleared her throat. "She was there," she said. The room listened. The oldest director, who rarely speaks, added, "And she told the truth when the truth was expensive." Slides cannot do that. Only time and a backbone can. I finished with a one-page decision sheet. Pause or proceed. Pausing meant costs, penalties, and a chill over suppliers. Proceeding meant confidence, integration steps, and a first 100 days plan with names and dates. I did not preach. I showed a weather report and a map. The chair thanked me. The CEO smiled without teeth. The secretary stacked the papers, green clips shining like leaves. We were ready for the vote, but there was one more thing I had not yet put on the table. Because timing is part of truth. From the notebook's back pocket, I slid out a document that did not belong to the deal but lived beside it, quietly, like a lighthouse near a rocky bay. I placed it face down and rested my hand on the page. The room stilled. The CEO stared. He did not know there was another light waiting to turn on. The boardroom smelled like paper and glass. I set the face-down document in the middle of the table and waited for the murmur to fade. The chair folded his hands. The corporate secretary lifted her pen. The CEO leaned back as if distance could make a different outcome. I turned the page over. It was a key person letter, signed by the other side's chair and counsel. It said our deal relied on continuity of execution by 3 named people: operations, finance, and me. If any of the 3 were removed without cause before closing, the counterparty could delay, demand fresh diligence, or walk, with costs to us. It was not dramatic. It was practical. A ship does not swap the captain while threading a narrow channel. The room listened the way rooms do when the stakes stop being abstract. The banker came off mute. He confirmed the letter lived in the data room from the first week of Diligence. He read the file code. The secretary located it, nodded, and stapled my paper copy into the minutes. Evidence, not noise. The CEO smiled a thin smile. "This reads like leverage," he said. "It reads like responsibility," I answered. "They trust us because we act like adults. If we want their trust to cross the finish line, we respect the people doing the work." The oldest director spoke first. "I do not like being hurried," he said, "but I dislike waste more." He asked the banker to describe what a delay would cost. The banker did not round the numbers. Delay meant lost confidence, penalty fees, and a line of suppliers waiting for reassurance we could not give. He paused. "Markets punish hesitation," he said. The lawyer read the clause again, slower this time, like a bell. He added 2 notes. First, that my termination fell squarely within the window. Second, that the notice and escrow milestones were satisfied. "The special session is proper," he said. "The vote you take will be binding for the limited purpose of continuity." The chair asked me to explain in plain words how the next 72 hours would run if we proceeded. I spoke like a person giving directions after a storm. Day 1. Confirm transition work streams and set daily check-ins. Day 2. Joint statement with the counterparty, calm and factual, announcing that teams were aligned and integration mapping had begun. Day 3. Supplier reassurance calls starting with the 3 oldest contracts. "No drums," I said. "Just clocks. The CEO cleared his throat. He said he respected continuity but worried about tone if I were reinstated. He used the word reinstated like it was a stain. I let the word sit on the table until it lost its shape. You do not need to like my tone, I said. You need to like the result. A new director asked me what would happen to culture if we pushed forward under this cloud. I told her clouds move when people do. We would show, in small daily acts, that work matters more than posture. Answers returned, suppliers paid on time, travel approved for the right reasons, and meetings that end when the work does. People take their weather from the top, I said. The chair looked to the corporate secretary. She read the motion required by the clause, each syllable clean. The motion did not ask how anyone felt. It asked one question: to proceed with the deal under the named responsible executors for the limited window, with the authority and resources already allocated. The authority was not glamorous. It was checklists, sign-offs, and the patience to say no when the easy answer is yes. The chair opened the floor again, and for a moment no one spoke. In that quiet, I remembered a morning when a factory flood forced us to choose what to save first. We lifted raw materials and laptops. We left furniture. You learn what matters when the floor gets wet. This was another wet floor. The CEO tried one more angle. He said investors might prefer a stronger personal brand in front of the deal. He meant himself. The chair asked for data showing investors would abandon a signed, funded transaction because my name was on the work plan. There was none. He pivoted to a story about momentum. Stories are lovely. Numbers carry the day. I did not attack him. I did not forgive him. I did what my mother taught me, to make the next right move. I said I would accept oversight from the chair and weekly reviews with 2 directors who had not worked closely with me before. Fresh eyes, no pride. You will not need to trust my promises, I said. You can trust your calendars. A director from Europe asked about regulatory timing if we stumbled now. Counsel explained the filings we would need to redo, the extra cycles, the quarter we would lose. He drew a simple line on the page. Lost quarters are not returned by apology. The secretary reached the agenda item labeled vote. The word sat in the room like a drumbeat. I breathed once and pictured my grandmother's biscuit tin. I pictured my daughter doing her homework, pencil tapping. I pictured the people on our floors who do not sit in boardrooms but feel their earthquakes anyway. My voice was steady when I said, whatever you decide, decide cleanly. The chair lifted his eyes. We will vote by show of hands, he said. In favor of proceeding as moved? 2 hands rose, then 3, then a 4th. The CEO waited, trying to read the tide. He raised his hand too. Opposed? The chair asked. 1 hand. Then none. The secretary began to count, her pen moving with a steady rhythm. She finished her tally and opened her mouth to speak the number, and in that breath, the door handle turned, slow and deliberate, as if the corridor itself had decided to join us. The door opened, and the general counsel stepped in with a folder that looked heavier than paper. He whispered to the corporate secretary, then set the folder next to the chair. The chair nodded, eyes moving quickly, and asked the secretary to finish the count. She read the number, the motion carried by a clear majority. The room exhaled. For the limited window defined by the clause, authority to proceed sat with the 3 responsible executors. It sounded simple. It was the ground shifting. The CEO kept his face calm, but the edge around his mouth gave him away. He reached for his phone, then thought better of it. The chair thanked everyone for brevity and asked me to name the first 3 actions we would take before noon. I spoke without decoration. 1. Confirm joint statement language with the counterparty. Factual, short, no theater. 2. Activate supplier reassurance calls in the order we mapped months ago. 3. Publish the first 100 days work grid to department heads with names and dates. The counsel who had entered late cleared his throat. He pointed to the folder. In it sat a letter the counterparty had just transmitted, time-stamped minutes earlier. It congratulated us on the internal alignment and asked for confirmation that the named executors had the resources required. If not, they would pause integration until we did. It was a polite hand on our backs. We had asked for rain. Now we needed to prove our roof. The CEO tried to reclaim center stage. He said he supported the vote in spirit, but wanted to calibrate optics, so the market understood the role he had played in sponsoring momentum. The chair looked at him a long moment, as if deciding which shelf to put that sentence on. Then he asked a single question. "Did you sign the term sheet?" The CEO stared at the glass. "Silence," answered. "We moved to implementation." The secretary read the instructions that follow a special session vote. Temporary authorities, reporting cadence, and the accountability grid I had proposed. The room felt steadier with each small rule spoken out loud. You can feel a ship catch the channel when the keel aligns with the current. We were, at last, moving with the water. Then came the shock. The council held up a second memo, this one from compliance. In the weeks since the CEO arrived, he had approved 3 discretionary communications that touched sensitive deal areas without logging them in the data room. None were fatal alone, but together they formed a pattern that might be read as a personal marketing plan nested inside a corporate transaction. Compliance recommended immediate review and a halt to any public comments outside the joint statement. The CEO said it was a misunderstanding. The oldest director adjusted his glasses and requested that we reaffirm the rule we teach every new analyst. If it is not in the record, it did not happen. He asked the secretary to minute that sentence. She did, word for word. Then he asked me whether these communications had affected negotiations. "No," I said, "but they could affect trust if we let them breathe." The banker agreed. "Markets watch behavior," he said, "not speeches." The vote was over, but the consequences of the vote had just begun. The chair issued 2 quiet directions. First, all deal-related communications would route through the 3 executors until closing. Second, compliance would review the CEO's outreach and recommend any remedial steps necessary to restore clean lines. No drama. Only breaks where the slope steepens. I asked for 5 minutes to brief the counterparty, while the secretary prepared the action notes. The chair nodded. I stepped into the corridor, called their chair, and spoke the steady language that keeps planes in formation. Aligned, proceeding, executors confirmed, resources greenlit, joint statement draft by 2. She thanked me for the calm and said she would alert her team to the same discipline on their side. When I returned, the room felt cooler, as if we had opened a window. The CEO requested one more chance to shape narrative. He proposed an internal video message with him front and center, assuring staff of his leadership through transition. I declined. "We are not performing," I said. "We are landing," the chair agreed. The oldest director suggested a short written note signed by the chair and me describing only the facts, the deal status, the work plan, the next check-in. We approved it. The CEO folded his idea in half and slid it under his notebook. That was when I turned to the other page I had kept quiet until the right moment, the page that had nothing to do with today's vote, and everything to do with what happens next. Years ago, while negotiating my compensation, I asked for something people rarely request, an ethical performance option tied to culture health and long-term returns, exercisable only if the board determined that leadership choices had harmed trust in ways not visible on a quarterly chart. It was quiet, like all the good tools. I never expected to need it. I hoped I never would. I placed the copy on the table. The chair read it once, then again, slower. He closed his eyes for a second, the way people do when a memory lines up with the present. The CEO pretended to check his watch. The oldest director looked at me, not with heat, but with a kind of relief that grown-ups keep for moments when a plan appears at the minute it is needed. We were not there yet. We did not need theater. We needed discipline and the courage to land the plane. Still, everyone in that room could feel the weight of the spare key. It did not threaten. It reminded, there are rules that keep companies from becoming mirrors for one person's ego. The chair closed the folder. "We proceed as voted," he said. "We will review the option after closing with clear eyes." I nodded. I could wait. Patience has a spine. That option was not noise. It was a measured doorway. If exercised after closing, it would trigger a review of leadership, including succession, with metrics tied to trust, conduct, and delivery. No headlines, just process. The CEO heard it, if he pretended he did not. He knew the calendar could become a mirror he might not enjoy. Now, to you watching. Many of you have been in rooms where a loud voice tried to turn work into a stage. When truth and order win, how should leaders handle the person who treated the company like a mirror? A public firing to set standards, or a private exit with a lesson attached? What would you choose, and why? I did not build that option for drama. I built it for rainy days when good people feel small and loud people feel tall. It was a quiet promise to myself that power would not walk around without shoes. I tucked it into my compensation years ago, when my title looked small and my responsibilities already felt big. I negotiated a lever that only moves when truth says it must. Always. The option was simple. If, after a significant event, the board found that leadership behavior had harmed trust or stability, they could trigger a formal review and consider changes up to succession. It did not name anyone. It did not chant slogans. It set a test, outcomes plus conduct. Results without integrity were not enough. Integrity without results was not enough. Both or neither. Back then, a colleague joked that I had built a trap for myself. I smiled. The best traps catch only the right animals. I was not afraid of being measured. I was afraid of being unmeasured. So while the special session vote gave me temporary authority to land the deal, the option sat in the future like a lighthouse we might need after we touch shore. Options like that should not be waved like flags. They should be handled like glass. After the vote, I walked the floors. People lifted their heads like flowers after hard rain. I spoke in small circles. "We are proceeding," I said. "Keep your lists short. Answer what is in front of you. If you are stuck, raise your hand early." My tone was soft. The CEO stayed in his office with the blinds partway closed. I felt no desire to gloat. He was good at many things: confidence, speed, and show. He was not good at the patience that keeps promises. I have seen careers turn because of that gap. I did not wish him harm. I wished the company a steady hand. By noon, we had the joint statement ready. Nothing poetic, only true. We sent it to the counterparty. They returned a sentence about shared values. We kept it. In the afternoon, I sat with finance. We checked the cash map, confirmed closing flows, and tested the integrations that look simple until you press a button. The young controller asked if I was angry about the morning's performance. "I am focused," I said. Anger eats time. I paused by the compliance desk. They were reviewing the CEO's off-book communications. They worked like surgeons, precise. They would not leak. At home that night, I sat at the kitchen table with a paper calendar and a pencil. I wrote the next 7 days in big letters. Under each, I listed 3 things that mattered most. My daughter did her homework at the other end of the table, and we met in the middle to compare lists. She wrote practice piano, call Nana, and be brave. I copied her 3rd item onto my day 3. The morning of day 2, the CEO asked for a private meeting. I agreed. We sat in a small room off the board corridor. He looked tired. He said he wanted to find a way to coexist through closing. I told him I welcomed that. Coexisting is easy when everyone respects the fence. He nodded, then asked if the board would reconsider optics and announce him as the face of the integration. I said the integration did not need a face. It needed a spine. He asked whether the option I had presented would be used against him. I said it was not against anyone. It was for the company. He said he felt set up. I said we set up rules years ago so no one would need to guess what happens when fog rolls in. You can choose to be measured, I said, or you can choose to perform. The calendar will keep the score. We ended with a handshake that felt like a truce written in light pencil. The next hours were slow and strong. Operations met suppliers and listened more than they spoke. HR drafted a short note reminding managers how to answer questions, with facts, not gossip. Legal finished the closing checklist and taped it to the wall. I carried the ethical option like a sealed letter in my pocket. I did not want to open it. Still, I could feel pressure building under the floor. A journalist texted asking about internal tension during a landmark transaction. I thanked her and said we were aligned and focused on delivery. Then I walked to the warehouse. In the warehouse, the air smelled like cardboard and effort. The supervisor showed me the packing line we would scale after closing. He worried about overtime. I told him we would approve it for a month and then review. People hear rumors, he said. They want to know if they can plan birthdays. Tell them to plan, I said. By evening, we had met every item on the day's list. The chair sent a short note to the board. Progress steady, risks managed, closing on schedule. On the morning of day 3, the compliance review landed on my desk with an elastic band around it. The memo was careful. 2 of the CEO's communications were harmless. 1 was not. It referenced legacy underperformers and suggested that integration gives us cover to clean house. The recipient was a friendly journalist who had not published. The memo ended with a recommendation. The board should consider whether leadership choices had harmed trust and whether the ethical option should be placed on the agenda for the first meeting after closing. The room around me went quiet, even though I was alone. I ran a finger along the elastic band, then picked up the phone to call the chair. As the line rang, a new email arrived. It was from the counterparty's counsel. Urgent. Press inquiry received regarding layoffs tied to integration. Request immediate assurance. I answered the chair first and read the email from the counterparty's counsel out loud, slow and calm. He listened without interrupting and asked for two things: a short assurance we could send within 15 minutes and a plan to keep staff steady if rumors broke. I said yes to both. We did not need poetry. We needed clean sentences and a backbone. I drafted the assurance in plain English. No excuses, no adjectives. There is no plan for layoffs tied to integration. We will protect continuity across teams and suppliers. Any role changes, if needed, will follow our normal, respectful process and will not use integration as cover. I sent it to legal. They removed one comma. We signed. The counterparty replied within 2 minutes. Thank you. We will share this verbatim with the journalist. Then I wrote a note to our managers. It fit in one screen. Stay close to your people. If someone asks about jobs, answer with facts. We are hiring for the new capacity. Overtime is approved. We will communicate early if anything changes. Do not speculate. Do not perform. Keep doing the work. I pressed send and felt the room exhale. Next came vendors. The operations lead and I split the call list. I took the old ones, the family companies who have carried us in hard seasons. I spoke with a woman who runs a small plastics plant with her brother. Her voice shook. A driver told her he heard we were cutting orders. I told her the truth, the opposite. We will need more from you. I promised a written confirmation by day's end. She cried and laughed in one breath. We sent the joint press line at 2. It was quiet and factual, the way grown-ups talk when the wind rises. The journalist replied, thanked us, and said she had received a different comment suggesting we might clean house. I said we had seen it, and we were addressing the confusion internally. She did not press. By 3, the floor felt warmer. Footsteps either scatter or settle. They were settling. HR hosted 2 listening sessions with one rule. Tell the truth. Keep it kind. They filled in minutes. People spoke, then returned to work with less static in their heads. At 4, finance pinged me about a cash timing detail around escrow release. It was small, but I like small things tidy. We traced the steps like pilots reading a checklist. Wire references matched. Settlement windows aligned with the charter. We signed the release authorization and logged it in 3 places. On my walk to the exit, I passed the CEO's office. He stood at the window, watching the rain on the plaza. He did not turn. I did not stop. I felt no triumph, only the responsibility that follows a decision. At home, my daughter was waiting with 2 mugs and a playlist we keep for storm days. We sat at the table and let the music be small. She asked if people were scared. I said yes, but we were giving them reasons to breathe. She asked if I was scared. I told her the truth. I am careful. We cooked soup and texted Nana a photo. Nana wrote back, "Finish what you started." I smiled at the sink. My grandmother would have said the same. She would have checked the locks and the receipts and then told me to sleep. Before bed, I opened my paper calendar and crossed off the day. Under tomorrow, I wrote 3 things: confirm regulator call, publish integration map, visit night shift. I left the phone in the kitchen. Sleep found me fast and quiet. At 5:30, the alarm rang. The city was still. I boiled water and watched steam ribbon the air. Then I opened the laptop and found 2 emails waiting like stones on a path. The first was clean. The counterparty confirmed the journalist had accepted our statement and would publish no rumor. The second was heavier. Our regulator requested a brief call to review public and private communications related to the transaction, scheduled for 11. I called counsel and we practiced. He asked me to answer in short lines. He would handle law. I would handle facts. We reviewed the 3 communications under compliance review. 2 were annoying and harmless. 1 was neither. We agreed on the words we would use. Unlogged draft comment. Not shared externally. Inconsistent with policy. Controls reinforced. No impact on deal economics. At 9, I visited the warehouse. Night shift workers were clocking out, eyes tired and proud. I thanked them by name. We watched a pallet wrap spin and hum. One man asked if his daughter should accept a new lease. Yes, I said. Tell her to choose the one with sunlight. I walked the office floors next. People looked up, and then they smiled the way you do when your plane touches down and you feel the wheels kiss the runway. We were not at the gate yet, but we were over land. At 10:59, I entered the small conference room off legal with a glass of water and a non-squeaky chair. The regulator joined, voice older than mine and careful. She asked for a short narrative of the last 72 hours. I gave it to her like a recipe. Ingredients, steps, timing. Counsel added the legal spice. She asked about the unlogged message. We told her the truth. She paused. Controls? She said. Reinforced, I answered. She thanked us and asked for a one-page note confirming the controls. The call ended. I looked at the clock and felt my shoulders drop. The air changed. We were almost through the weather. I walked to finance, steadying my breath, ready to face whatever numbers waited for us. Then my phone buzzed, and the subject line on the screen made the floor tilt under my feet. Immediate. Compliance anomaly identified in escrow trail. Review required before release. The subject line glared at me like a headlight. Compliance anomaly in escrow. I went to the small room near finance where the air always smells like paper and old coffee. The controller sat with 2 screens open and a yellow pad covered in square handwriting. She pointed to a line on the reconciliation. A transfer reference looked 1 digit off from the escrow notice. 1 digit is a mile when trust is flying at low altitude. I asked her to show me the trail. We stepped through it slowly like hikers on a narrow path. Bank A booked the wire into escrow at 09:14 yesterday, value date today. Our system mirrored it at 09:15 with an automated confirmation. The external notice showed a 7, where our mirror showed a 1. Everything else matched. The amount, the counterparty code, the SWIFT tags, the initiating officer, 1 digit. If we ignored it, no one might ever know. If we let it live, it could chew a hole in our hull. I called the banker and put him on speaker. These things happen, he said. Sometimes a bank system prints a reference string with a formatting quirk. Sometimes the mirror reads an older cache. He offered to send a stamped letter confirming that the mirror should be considered the source of truth. I thanked him and said we would still run an internal audit. He agreed. Adults like being checked by adults. Counsel slid into the room. I briefed him in 6 sentences. He nodded and called it what it was. A procedural itch, not a rash. Still, he wanted the itch solved before we scratched. We convened what we call the clean hands circle: finance, legal, compliance, and operations. The rule is simple. Nothing leaves this room until the numbers in the story say the same thing. We started the clock and opened the audit window. The steps were boring by design. First, reconcile end-to-end with the raw bank feed, not screenshots. Second, trace authorizations against the who touched what log. Third, request a second source confirmation from the custody bank holding escrow. Fourth, confirm that no downstream process depended on the odd digit. Fifth, if a correction is needed, document it, sign it, and update the minutes. I called the counterparty's finance lead and told her exactly what we had found. No spin, no drama. She laughed softly. You called us about 1 digit? Yes, I said. Because 1 digit becomes a story if we hide it. She said she would note it, and that she trusted adults who share small problems. We waited for the raw feed. I would not let panic play. I walked to the window and watched buses stack at the light and unstack again. I remembered the day the factory floor went wet, and we chose what to lift first. We lifted the things that hold other things. That is what audit is, lifting the courage to be exact. The raw feed arrived. The odd digit was ours, not the bank's. Our mirror process had read a cached field while the actual reference rolled forward. The fix was a 1-line patch and a log note, small but not invisible. We wrote the note like adults. Mirror ingested cached field. Corrected. No downstream dependencies. Controls updated. Tested by 2. Compliance checked the who touched what log. No surprises. 2 people looked. 1 person fixed. Counsel observed. The custody bank sent a second confirmation with the correct reference and a line that made the room breathe. Escrow balance intact. No variance. Operations confirmed that nothing downstream depended on the odd string. HR, procurement, and vendor systems all took their cue from the amount and the closing date, not the reference code. The controller drew a small box on her yellow pad and wrote "Done" inside it. We smiled at the box. I called the counterparty back and told her the source of the glitch and the fix. She thanked me and said she would put our note in their minutes. She added something kind. "This is why we trusted your team with the heavy end." I felt the knot behind my ribs loosen a little. Integrity weighs less when two people carry it. With the window still open, we used the time to sweep the room. We reread the joint statement, compared it to the regulator call notes, and checked that our 3-person authority grid matched the clause and today's date. The secretary came by with the minutes. We signed without flourish. At noon, I walked the floor. People were working like rain had finally cooled the pavement. The youngest analyst stopped me in the hallway. "Why do we tell the other side about things we could fix in silence?" she asked. "Because silence is debt," I said. "It grows interest." On my way back, I passed the CEO. He asked if the anomaly was handled. I said yes. He nodded and smiled as if he had always been part of the fix. I did not correct him. The work itself will tell the story later. By 3, the audit window closed with a quiet click you could almost hear. Compliance logged the memo. Legal filed the patch note. Finance archived the raw feed and the custody letter. We were ready to authorize release. The deal was not only alive, it was clean. I sent a short update to the board. Anomaly identified in escrow reference. Root cause internal mirror cache. Corrected, tested, no impact on funds or timing. Audit window closed. The chair replied with one word I like more than praise. Noted. I allowed myself 10 minutes of stillness in the garden behind the building. I thought about the promise I made at the start of this journey, to be the same person on Monday morning as on Friday night, to keep people safe by keeping paper honest. I texted Nana a single sentence. Numbers and story match. We set a second control for next time. The mirror now waits for the final reference before writing, and a simple alert pings 2 people if a mismatch appears. I asked the controller to run a tiny drill at week's end so the team can practice the fix. Small drills prevent big panics. They teach a habit I love: finish, verify, tell the truth. Then my phone vibrated again, 3 times, fast. The communications lead wrote, "Heads up. A columnist just tweeted a teaser, inside the Takeover, who gets tossed when the party ends. Source unnamed but friendly to our CEO. He's on the phone with her now." The tweet floated through the office like smoke. People saw it, frowned, and kept working. A rumor finds oxygen only if we wave our hands at it. I walked to communications and asked for the thread. The columnist had written a line meant to sting. "Who gets tossed when the party ends?" There was no party. There was work. The CEO stood on the balcony with his phone angled from the rain. His voice carried in bursts. Narrative. Clean house. Vision. I did not hover. I went back to the clean hands circle and asked compliance for the timeline of his messages. We had done the hard part. Now we would let quiet truth do what it does. Outlast noise. Communications drafted our note to staff. 1 careful paragraph, not naming the tweet. We reminded people we move by policy, not gossip. Overtime remained approved. Hiring continued in units tied to new capacity. It read like a compass, and it steadied hands. The columnist called our press line. I spoke to her. I told her we were closing on schedule, reaffirmed no layoffs tied to integration, and said our focus was suppliers and staff first. I added, any messages implying otherwise came from individuals acting outside policy and had been corrected. She asked if I meant the CEO. I repeated the policy line. You do not need to name a person for the truth to land. Meanwhile, the counterparty released our joint statement. It was plain and decent. It praised teams and named the first 3 integration work streams. No adjectives. Most outlets ignored it. That is the mark of good process. No fireworks, only progress. By noon, the columnist posted an update. She had a firm denial of layoffs and confirmation that both companies would honor commitments. Her tone softened. She added that sources now disagreed about culture. Readers like culture fights. We do not fight culture. We water it. A staff member sent me a photo from the warehouse. 2 workers laughing while a pallet wrap spun. It looked like a small flag. I saved it and kept moving. We finished supplier calls. The plastics plant accepted a larger order. The supervisor promised a picture when they hired the 4th nephew. At 3, the banker confirmed final escrow release. The balance moved like a tide. Legal closed the folder with a nod. We did not clap. We had a closing to land at 4:30 with signatures and 2 screens. The regulator sent a short follow-up. Controls note received. Thank you, I breathed out. I sent the board 2 words. Call concluded. The chair replied with a checkmark. In our place, a checkmark can feel like a hug. The CEO asked to record a congratulatory video. We declined. We sent a written note signed by the chair and me instead. It said thank you twice and well done once. I asked communications to print copies for the mailroom, so workers who never watch streams would still see it. The clerk grinned and said he would put one in every locker like a holiday card. At 4, we gathered in the small boardroom. Screens came alive. The counterparty chair waved with tired eyes. We signed the packet line by line, names and dates aligned like buttons. The deal closed at 4:18 p.m., with rain outside and new paper in the air. We did not open champagne. We ordered sandwiches and walked the floors. People smiled in a quiet way that lasts longer than a party. The printer jammed and someone fixed it. The lifts dinged and carried tired bodies down to buses and small kitchens where soup waits. I texted Nana. Closed. She replied, Good, rest your eyes. The board reconvened at 6 for updates. Compliance summarized its memo with restraint. The chair spoke softly about trust. He did not shame or shout. He said we would follow our own map. Then the oldest director raised the quiet option I earned years ago. He read the trigger, a formal review of leadership, including succession, if behavior harmed trust. He suggested placing it on the agenda for a special meeting the next morning. The chair looked around the table. Heads nodded. I sat still. Inside, I felt something like a train choosing the right track, not triumph, alignment. The CEO said he was misunderstood, that strong change upsets people, that rumor follows vision. He said he supported whatever was best for the company. It sounded like surrender. The chair thanked him and suggested he take the evening with family. He agreed and left without his usual cologne. At 8, I walked the quiet building with a small box. The night crew waved. In the warehouse, the supervisor signed a new roster. We good? He asked. We are good, I said. Back in my office, the phone blinked with a message from the chair. Special meeting at 8 a.m. Please be ready. I looked at the wet city and pictured my daughter asleep with a book on her chest and my grandmother's biscuit tin under a bed. Full of little slips, the building settled. The rain slowed. I thought about power when it remembers it belongs to everyone who builds the day. It speaks less and listens more. It keeps receipts. It uses doors instead of walls. I turned off the light, picked up my bag, and felt the key in my pocket I never wanted to use. Cool as the moon. At 7:59 the next morning, I stood outside the boardroom with a folder and a quiet heart. The secretary opened the door. The chair lifted his eyes. The seat at the end of the table was empty. I took mine. My hands were steady, my breath slow. I was ready for whatever the morning chose to show me. The clock moved to 8. The chair cleared his throat, and before he could speak, the handle turned again, and a figure stepped in whom none of us expected to see. The figure at the door was the founder, rain on his coat, eyes clear. He had sold his voting block years ago, but the room still leaned when he breathed. He greeted the chair, nodded to the secretary, and looked at me as if he remembered the first day I walked in with a borrowed laptop and a stubborn plan. He sat at the end and folded his hands. I asked to observe, he said. If the board allows, the chair agreed. The CEO was absent. The founder glanced at the window and then at the minutes. I have one sentence, he added. This company keeps its promises, or it is not this company. The secretary called the meeting to order. Compliance summarized the memo about the unlogged communications. Legal confirmed the option I had earned, its triggers and limits. The chair opened the floor. I did not speak first. I wanted the room to choose its weather. The oldest director lifted the quiet option like a key. Trust is not a press release, he said. It is a pattern. He moved that we trigger the post-closing review under the ethical option, effective today, and appoint an interim leader until the review concluded. He looked at me but did not name me. Names should come from votes, not glances. A newer director, once skeptical of my calm, surprised me. She listed the last 3 days like beads: clause honored, audit window held, regulator satisfied, joint statement aligned, escrow cleared, staff steady. "We teach our children that how we win matters," she said. "Let us teach with our vote." She seconded the motion. Silence collected like dew. Then the door opened again. The CEO entered. He took his seat and asked to speak. The chair nodded. The CEO said he had chased momentum too hard, that he had spoken to the columnist and regretted his words, that he wanted to serve wherever useful. He asked us to consider optics again. The founder's eyebrows moved, then settled. The chair thanked him, then asked a single question. "If you were not you, would you keep you?" The CEO stared at the polished table. "Not like this," he said. We voted. Hands rose. The motion carried. The review would begin. An interim leader would be appointed. The chair turned to the minutes for the next step. The room waited. The founder's hands remained folded, the way someone respects a ceremony they no longer control. The chair spoke my name. "Interim," he said, "effective immediately." I felt the air shift, more honest. I thanked the room with one sentence I had written in my head years ago. "We will do the work and let the work speak." The founder smiled. The secretary pinned the time to the page. I made 3 promises in plain words. First, no revenge. Anyone who wants to work with care and clarity will have a place. Second, paper before speech. We will log, then talk. Third, people first. Suppliers, staff, and customers will feel the change in the way we answer the phone. I asked the chair to add 2 weekly open hours, where any employee could walk into my office without an appointment. He nodded. Rules keep doors open. The CEO stood. He said he would take the evening to consider his future and support the transition. He shook my hand. His grip was colder than his cologne. He left without a final look at the glass wall he loved. The door closed behind him with a soft click. We turned to work. The review committee was named. 3 directors, counsel, and an outside ethics advisor who reads more than she speaks. A 30-day timeline, a right to be heard, a duty to listen. No theater. The committee would examine conduct, not gossip, facts, not feelings. Whatever their conclusion, we would publish a short note on lessons learned, in real English, with verbs. By noon, the building felt taller. People walked straighter. The warehouse sent the photo they promised, 4 nephews in new safety vests. The plastics plant faxed a hand-drawn thank you. Finance balanced the new ledger lines. Operations posted the integration map on cork, not glass, because cork invites pushpins and edits. We were no longer holding our breath. We were breathing. At home that night, my daughter baked a crooked cake that tasted like courage. We wrote "Keep Your Promises" on it with uneven letters. Nana called and told a story about the biscuit tin, and how some days the lid weighs more than the tin. "Lift it anyway," she said. "That is the job." I slept with the window open and woke to a city that sounded ordinary again. Ordinary is a miracle after a storm. I ironed my blouse, tied my hair, and walked in before the lights were fully awake. On my desk lay a small envelope with the founder's handwriting. Inside was a single line. "Hold the keel." I put it under the glass where the mouse rests, so my hand could feel the weight of it when I moved. If you are watching this, and you are over 35, you know the taste of days like these. You know that dignity is a muscle and rules are a shelter. You have seen loud men confuse mirrors with windows. I am not interested in mirrors. I am interested in mornings. So here is my ask, strong and simple. If you believe work should be quieter and truer than the noise, share this story with one friend who would stand beside you in a storm. In the comments, tell me the one rule you keep when pressure rises, or the moment you learn to hold the keel. Your words will help someone you will never meet. This real story is complete. We closed. We chose conduct with results. We kept our promises and we will keep keeping them. Thank you for watching today.